Hello and welcome back to Brands Hatch for round 8 of the TCT Dunlop Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK. Now earlier on we saw one race, a very, very exciting race too. Lewis Kent, who was at that stage leading the championship, is now second behind James Turkington, who managed to get a very, very well-deserved second place in the race and therefore first place in TCR UK. Now the cars are coming out onto the grid right now, just making their way through the first of their two warm-ups. As they head onto the grid, they're going to form up behind me here. If we take a little stroll, we'll go as far as we can, which isn't particularly far at this stage, as the cars head out onto the track. We spoke to Alex Day earlier on as well. Now Alex in the Audi, he had some problems on the lead up to this race. They actually couldn't get the car started, but they managed to get the car started for the first race eventually, and they just managed to get it started this time as well, so it looks like they've learned from the earlier mistakes. Lewis Kent had a few problems really with tyre degradation. It was not all that hot, I suppose, out on track. It wasn't cold, but his tyres went off when he had about 2 or 3 laps to go and eventually couldn't hold on and actually finished 6th in the end. So it was a bit of a disaster for Lewis, but he knows he can make it up in this race. No ballast in the car to add to his woes as well, but James Turkington's got a fair bit of weight going onto the car, so he is going to be struggling a little bit when it comes to the last 5-6 minutes of this race. Around about 23 laps we imagine we'll have around Brands Hatch, something like that, as they're lapping at around the 50-second mark or 55-second mark. Around the area, depends on the weather, but if it stays like this, we should be looking good. Very comparable to other forms of touring car that you see at Brands Hatch. And we saw Mr. Henry Neal do pretty well. He got his first ever race win in TCT and with TCR as well in the classes. And Alex Day is now making it out onto the grid now, as we can see. So what does this mean for us going in? As your Lewis Kent throwing that car around, trying to get some heat into those tyres. He's going to have to sit here for a fair bit of time. So looking at the earlier lap times, we're lapping the best at a 49.7. So in race trim, these cars running a 49-second lap. So we are talking some pretty decent lap times here. So Alex's car is now in. They're just checking it over once again. Lewis is going up and they'll do the usual changing of the tyres back to front, left to right, as the other cars start making it onto the grid. So the story really earlier on today was all about Lewis Kent leading the championship on the way into the first race, not leading it on the way out though. He had a really, really disastrous point, almost disaster there for the Audi, as the laptop almost just fell off the roof, but they managed to catch hold of it. You actually get a really good sight right now at the pneumatic jacks on these cars, lifted up very, very cleverly. It's pretty standard when it comes to touring cars though, isn't it, on pneumatic jacks? But you see them moving front to back on the tyres. As we carry on looking down, Henry Neal is going to make his way to the front. Very, very heavy car. And James Turkington pulls into place as well. There you go, just making sure his brakes work, and they do. Henry Neal into position. In comes Nick Halstead. That was a very solid third for him in that last race there. He had 2 6s prior to this and then third in that last race. Very, very nice for him. And we can start taking a little stroll and having a look at a few of these cars. Now, you can hear the turbo, or you can hear the engine revving on this car, on Henry's car. Now, Henry's not sitting there doing this, by the way. This is all done using the engine, using the computer, the electronic computer, the ECU in this car. It will rev the engine, and that is to cool the turbo down. So as the turbo's been going around here, it needs to cool before they would switch it off. If you ever go to touring car racing, you'll hear these engines doing this, and it's literally something that happens before they can turn the car off. When it gets happy, it will then settle down, and they know the turbo's at the right temperature. We'll just have a listen for a few seconds. There you go. So once the turbo is in the right position or the right temperature, then it will just go back to standard revving. So that isn't actually the driver. The driver's not sitting there with the foot on the throttle, on, off, on, off, on, off. It's all done by the ECU. As we head a little bit further back, well, James Turkington now leading the championship. He is now, I think, 7 points ahead, something like that. I was trying to do some maths earlier on, 7 or 8 points ahead at the moment. And he's got a very heavy car when you compare it to Lewis Kent, who is just 2 cars back from him on the grid. In between is Stuart Lines, directly ahead of Lewis Kent, and across the way from Lewis, Alex Day and Nick Halstead. Now, Lewis can sometimes be very, very good off the line, but he bogged down that first race. We know that Alex had a terrible one. He lit the tyres up and got nowhere. out of the 7 cars on the track, I would say the main one who got away very well was James Turkington. If he can get a jump on Henry Neal, it should be very, very exciting going into the last 2 races of the season, a long way down the line. What are we talking, October? So at the moment, that man back there, Lewis Kent, needs a result. He needs to jump Turkington if he can. He needs to certainly get some decent points there, and certainly not let James Turkington start to pull away from him in this championship. If we went into the first race in October, some 20 odd points behind, it would be very, very bad for him indeed. So if he can gain on James Turkington, it'd be a nice result for him, and that's certainly what he's going to be looking at. So as you can see, the cars are ready, the teams are ready, and we are ready to get off the grid. So let's hand over to our race commentator for the final time today for TCR UK and TCT. Here he is, Andy McEwen.
Thanks, Bryn. Well, this, all of a sudden, has started to feel rather tense, and I love it. This is my favourite time of year, when we get into the final couple of rounds of a championship, and we start to really analyse those points and really look at who needs to do what. Now, the championship can't be wrapped up in this race. That's mathematically not possible, so we know now that it will go down to the decider at Donington Park. However, who will lead the championship going to Donington Park is an entirely different matter. It looks incredibly likely that we're going to be down to 2 or 3 points, maybe, that will separate them. I'm not one to make bold predictions, but if you look at the form and you look at the success ballast in the cars and who should do what in this race, you would bet on Lewis Kent probably undoing some of the damage done by James Turkington in race 1, because Turkington's car is now a little bit heavier than it was in race 1, whereas Lewis Kent had lost the bulk of the success ballast that he was lugging around for that first race of the day. Therefore, it's a good chance that Lewis might beat James in this race and undo some of the damage done in race 1. By my reckoning, it's 12 points in it. James Turkington has scored 28 points so far this weekend, 3 points from qualifying for being the 3rd highest TCR car on the grid, and the maximum 25 points for the TCR class victory in race 1. There are no bonus points for fastest laps or anything like that. So 28 points scored for James Turkington. Lewis Kent, on the other hand, was 1 position behind James on the grid. He scored 2 points for qualifying, and then 12 points for finishing 4th place in the TCR class in race 1, having lost that position to Stuart Lyons late in the day. The place that he lost to Alex Day on the last corner didn't affect his championship standings because they were in different classes. Alex Day is a TCT car, whereas Lewis Kent racing just against the TCR cars as far as points are concerned. So he racked up a 4th place finish. That scored him 12 points, a total of 14 so far this weekend, which means that he's now on 99 points. James Turkington is on 111, and even by my very rough maths, I can tell that that's 12-point advantage now for the Northern Irishman, with 3 races still to go, though, and that's the thing. There are still some 80 points on offer coming into this race. 3 wins, 3 races with 25 points available for a win, plus another qualifying session at Donington Park next time out, where there are potentially 5 points up for grabs for qualifying on pole position there. So with 80 points still on the table, it's therefore, or not particularly likely, that we're going to see the championship decided here today. In fact, after this race, we will still have 55 points left, so it's not possible for James Turkington to pull 55 points clear. So we'll go down to Donington Park. The question will be who leads the championship and by what margin. Coming into this weekend, remember, it was 2 points the advantage for Lewis Kent in the Hyundai. Well, James Turkington in 1 race has been able to overhaul that and pull clear once again. As for the other stories, well, Henry Neal got his first overall race victory. He's won the TCT class a number of occasions this year, but he's not won an overall race. He got that first victory and starts on pole. He's therefore the heaviest car on the grid, and he will have to try really hard now to fend them all off behind. We know that that car is at a bit of a disadvantage off the line, because unlike the TCR cars, it does not have a launch control system. So he may drop back at the start, but then with the weight on board, will he be able to make the same sort of progress as he did in race 1? He's got James Turkington, the points leader in TCR, alongside him. Nick Halstead on the podium in race number 1. He will gain a little bit of weight now, but should still be fairly competitive. And Stuart Lyons, likewise, alongside him on row number 2. Alex Day, they hopefully have got their issues sorted now, but he's looking for a better start this time, from 5th on the grid. He'll be on the inside this time, with Lewis Kent starting down in 6th, which is where he started race 1. He got as high as 3rd place at one point, but then slipped back down the order again, with Darrell Wilson in the Vauxhall Astra rounding out the runners. And Darrell had a pit lane visit in the first race. We never did find out what the issue was there, but he's back on track, which is good news. and hopefully that car should be now running at full speed, and he will be looking to try and come through the field with Lewis Kent as well. So a fascinating racing prospect here, 23 minutes plus 1 lap the distance as always, and after this race we will know who is going to lead the championship going to Donington Park at the end of the season. That Donington Park round on the in October, the 19th of October, and the 18th and 19th of October I should say. 2 races on the Sunday, of course, so there's a bit of a break now. Got a month and a bit before the final rounds at Donington, just to ramp up the pressure even more. The drivers have to sit around waiting for that final round. We don't have to wait any longer though for our final race here at Brands Hatch, because the lights are on and we're about to go in round number 8 of the championship. Away we go. James Turkington makes another decent start from the outside of row 1, so too does Stuart Lyons from further back, but it will be, perhaps unsurprisingly, Turkington that leads him into the first corner, and Lewis Kent on the grass already as he tries to come through from the back of the grid. He wants to make early progress before Turkington escapes up the road, but it's another poor start for Kent. He runs wide at the first corner but sees a gap down the outside, sails around the outside of Darrell Wilson and tries to go past Alex Day, but he's off the road. Lewis Kent's off into the gravel trap, onto the grass as well. Needs to be careful to keep it out of the barriers, and Lewis Kent, he was so desperate to make progress, but he's thrown on, well, not thrown it all away, but he's certainly thrown away a lot of track position. Look at the time that he's lost. He'll have dirt on the tyres as well, and that was a driver who was keen to get on with things but pushed too hard too soon, and unfortunately it's cost him dear. So Turkington leads the way. Neil is second. Halstead is still third, ahead of Stuart Lyons fourth, then Day and Darrell Wilson, so they're in grid order with the exception of the top 2, and the fact that Lewis Kent has now dropped right to the back of the field. So we need to keep an eye on the Essex and Kent Motorsport Hyundai i30N right at the tail end of the pack as they race towards Paddock Hill Bend for the second time, and Darrell Wilson there rounds out the leading train, but Lewis Kent down into 7th and crucially 5th in the TCR rankings. He needs to make some more progress from there, but this is a long race. He's got time, doesn't need to panic. I think that's what was going on there. He just panicked a bit too much at the start, thought, right, I've got to get all these places now before Turkington escapes, and actually ended up making the mistake on cold tyres. We can see already Kent is starting to close in on the cars in front, but then will he be able to pick them off? That car should be quicker now than it was in the previous race. Lewis's fastest lap in the previous race was the fastest TCR lap, it was a 49.9, so we'll watch with interest to see whether or not he can beat that. He should be able to, now that he's lost some weight in the car. Coming through there to complete the first full flying lap, Turkington 9/10 clear of Neil at the head of the field, then Halstead a further 7/10 back, and the fastest lap still belongs then to James Turkington at 50.2. Tyres still coming up to full temperature and pressure though. They won't be right into their operating window for another lap or so, but they should now have a bit more grip than they did on the first lap of the race. Out of Druids then, so James Turkington, despite this ballast, looking fairly secure out in front at the moment. His big rival was always going to be Kent, but Kent now is really pushing hard, and dare I say it, just needs to calm down a little bit, because if he keeps doing that he'll get pinged for track limits, he could damage the car and go off again. There is still time for this to swing back in his favour. Just needs to take a deep breath and let the race come to him, but that's a lot easier for me to say sat up here in the relative comfort of my commentary box than it is for Lewis strapped into that car pounding around the Brands Hatch Indy circuit that he knows so well. Turkington 50.046 now, his new fastest lap of the race, which is almost as quick as he went actually in the previous race, so the success ballast is not really hurting him too much. At the back of the pack though, Lewis Kent is going up the inside of Darrell Wilson, and did he make that one stick? I can see out of the window that he did, so the Hyundai is ahead now of the Vauxhall. That's 1 place gained, and it was a TCR car that he overtook as well, so there you can see it. Lewis Kent ahead now of Darrell Wilson, so that puts him into 4th position, 12 points on the board. Turkington on for the maximum 25 again at the moment. Kent slides the car through Surtees into clearways once again. Really harrying Alex Day, but the next car now needs to deal with Alex Day as quickly as possible. A, because all the time he spends stuck in the pack, Turkington is pulling away out in front, but B, because Alex Day is not a TCR car, so Kent can't really afford to waste any time racing him here. Needs to just get a move on and try and get past the Audi A4. He's had a better run out of Paddock Hill Bend. They're both starting to close in on Stuart Lyons in front though, so this is a 3-way fight, and Kent again sails it round the outside. Wasn't going to go right round the outside this time. He's learnt his lesson, but gets a much better exit from the corner and tries to attack down into Graham Hill Bend. Is there a gap on the inside? Well, yes there is, but Kent doesn't go for it, and Alex Day for the time being hangs on to what is 5th position outright. Aggressive pace here from Nick Halstead as well, whilst Lewis Kent, by the way, has now got the fastest lap. He just about was quicker than James Turkington a lap ago. A 49.939 is actually 100th of a second quicker already than he went in race number 1. Kent out of clearways, tries to get up the inside of Alex Day's Audi, which has good traction being rear-wheel drive, so Alex is able to fend off the Hyundai for now. Across the line into paddock, you can see the Audi getting away in a straight line, but then Lewis Kent sends it up the inside super late on the brakes, and that was one of the moves of the day from Lewis Kent, who is well and truly up for this in this one. He goes through past Alex Day and moves his way into 5th position overall, and now the next 2 cars in front of him are TCR cars, the first of which will be Stuart Lyons, and then a wayward, slightly wayward anyway, Nick Halstead there through Druids. We saw that Honda understeering a little in the previous race. It's a bit early in the race though to be wanting to deal with understeer at the moment. So Kent making progress. Black and white warning flag already though for Lewis for exceeding track limits, so that's going to be a story we need to follow. A time penalty could prove disastrous, and again it's early in the race. We're only about 5 or 6 minutes into this race, so if he's already getting warned for track limits, he's going to have to keep an eye on that. James Turkington sets the fastest lap now, 49.905. Lewis Kent can't quite match that, but then again he was overtaking Alex Day, and he's already latched onto the tail now of Stuart Lyons. Now Stuart Lyons and Lewis Kent had a great battle in race number 1, but this time around I think it's going to be a slightly shorter battle, and Stuart knew that Lewis was quicker there. That wasn't Stuart waving him through because he didn't want to impede the championship contender. He could just see A, how quickly Lewis Kent was going, and B, how aggressive Lewis was willing to be to make that move stick, and Stuart thought, you know what, if you really want that position, you go on and have it. So now Stuart will try and latch onto the tail of the i30M that is now into 3rd position in class. That means that it would score 15 championship points, just 10 fewer than Turkington. So as it stands now, 22 points would be the margin going to Donington Park, but there is still ground for Kent to make up here. And at this rate, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he could catch James Turkington, because he sets a new fastest lap, does Lewis Kent, at 49.756. He's now 2/10 quicker than he went in race number 1, and he's all over that curb through Paddock Hill Bend once again. He knows this place extremely well. The team are based about half an hour away from Brands Hatch, and he's driven more laps around the Brands Hatch Indy circuit probably than any other circuit in the world. Lewis Kent knows how to drive this place in the dry with a car that no doubt is feeling like a completely different animal than it did in race 1 earlier on, and he is really reaping the benefits of that now. He's almost on to terms with Nick Halstead for what would be 3rd place overall and 2nd within TCR. Clearways in the toe. Now is he going to be close enough to have another dive up the inside at Paddock? He's in one of those moods at the moment, Lewis, where I wouldn't put anything past him. I don't think he's close enough, though, on this occasion. 16 minutes plus 1 lap to go, and Lewis improves again on the fastest lap. He's now 4/10 quicker than he went in race 1. That's the effect the success ballast will have. No doubt they will have tweaked the setup as well between races to try and give him a bit more bite, and he goes for it at the inside. Halstead saw it coming, though. There was almost contact. Lewis doesn't want to waste any time here. He's already 4.1 seconds off the race leader, but crucially, on the previous lap, he was half a second quicker. So if he gets past Halstead quickly, he has got time to catch the top 2, and crucially, that means he could manage eventually to fight for another class victory, and that would really change the championship situation completely. Into clearways again, Halstead fending him off, but for how much longer? Kent is even closer this time onto the pit straight, and Nick Halstead, if he doesn't defend right over to the right-hand side of the road, I think that Kent is going to drive straight past him, but in fact he might be able to anyway, because Halstead leaves a gap, then comes across to defend. Is there a gap on the inside into Paddock? Yes, there is. The Hyundai goes for it, and Lewis Kent is into 2nd place in TCR. Runs a bit too wide, though, onto the dirty side of the road. There was little that Halstead could do to retaliate, though, because Lewis will just dive on the brakes into Druids. Ooh, almost contact, though. And in fact, they're still wheel-to-wheel through the corner. Halstead not giving up without too much of a fight here, but Lewis Kent, with a slightly lighter car, does come off the corner quicker, and he's into 3rd place now, 2nd in TCR. That's 18 points that would go his way now, just 7 fewer than James Turkington. But now we need to watch the timing screen. Lewis Kent at the start of the lap was in, well, 4th position, he's now 3rd, but he was 3.9 seconds behind race leader James Turkington, and of course they've still got Henry Neal between them as well. The lead gap, by the way, between Turkington and Neal, 1.7 seconds, and Henry does not at this stage of the race seem to have the pace to go after James, certainly compared to what he was able to do in the previous race. Lewis Kent comes across the line now. Yes, the starting point is 4 seconds. 4 seconds between them at the start of lap 11, and Kent is in 3rd place. So he's got to catch Henry Neal, get past Henry Neal, which is worth absolutely 0 extra championship points, but it then buys him a chance to chase down James Turkington. If he gets caught up with Henry, then that will allow James to escape. And right now, James is putting in a really solid pace consistently in the 49.9. So he's found his pace. He's sticking at it. He's not going as quickly as Lewis Kent is, but James Turkington, in true Turkington fashion, is just letting the race come to him, seeing what happens. If Lewis Kent is able to catch him, then fair play. Then they'll have a fight for the race victory. But for now, James isn't under any pressure. He can manage the tyres a little bit. There is the race leader. The Northern Irishman heads through Paddock Hill Bend. Lewis Kent, another fastest lap of 49.5, so about 4 tenths quicker than Turkington that time, and about 5 tenths quicker than Henry Neal. So the gap between Neal and Kent is 1.6 seconds now. Further back, by the way, Stuart Lyons and Alex Day have got themselves together, so that could be an interesting little TCR versus NGTC battle for 5th place overall, with Darrell Wilson some way behind them at the moment. Right, deep breath everyone, we've still got 13 minutes plus a lap to go. Who said TCR racing in the UK wasn't exciting? This is brilliant stuff, and I refuse to hear these comments that because it's a small grid it's not worth watching. This is turning into a sensational end of season fight here between Turkington and Kent for the championship, and when you throw in the likes of Henry Neal fighting for TCT honours as well, you're guaranteed good racing, and at the end of the day that really is all that we are interested in. If there's good racing and preferably a close championship fight at the end of the season, that's fine by me. I don't really care how many cars are on the track, and right now we could not have scripted how close this is going to be going to Donington Park next time out. So Lewis Kent then, sorry, rant over now, Lewis Kent then into 3rd position, is now only 1.3 seconds behind Henry Neal, and on the previous lap was 3 tenths quicker, so not quite as much time taken out of Henry. Now, I know it looks at the moment like Lewis is taking big chunks out of them, but as the tyres start to wear out, all of a sudden, regardless of what ballast you're on or what balance performance you've got, it tends to plateau a little bit, and there's less time to be found when you're on worn-out tyres. You also have to question how hard Lewis is pushing these tyres here in the first half of the race, because he's setting fastest lap after fastest lap. Yes, that's because the car is light, but he's also really driving the doors off it as well. So will that have an effect, a negative effect, in the second half of the race, tyre wear-wise? I'm not wishing that on him, it's just one of those things that may happen. 1.9 seconds the gap at the front, 0.9 between second and third. It wasn't the fastest lap last time for Lewis Kent. He was within a tenth or so of his best lap of the race, and the top three are only 2.8 seconds apart here. And there they are in the same shot as they race down the Cooper Straight. Lewis, not at the moment resorting to headlight flashing tactics, which is something I'm sure Henry Neal has seen before. Of course, Henry Neal and James Turkington are old sparring partners from the Mini Challenge. They raced in that championship for a couple of years together. Not in the same team, but on the same grid, and usually the same part of the grid as well. They were both pretty handy in the JCW Minis. 49.8 that time for Lewis Kent, so only a tenth up on Henry Neal. So this is what I mean, you see, as we get into the middle part of the race now, particularly into the second half. Henry Neal a bit wide there through Paddock Hill Bend, but as we get into that second half of the race now, maybe the advantage that Lewis has over the cars in front might start to just tail away. He will be hoping not, though. Black and white warning flag now for Henry Neal, and we just saw, I think, the reason he's been given that, because he ran wide not for the first time coming out of Paddock Hill Bend. This is the other battle I was on about between Stuart Lyons and Alex Day. Alex in the rear-wheel drive Audi has been able to catch the man who these days is behind the running of TCR UK, Stuart Lyons, and decided to come out and have a play as well this weekend. He hadn't got anybody to hire that car from him, so he's now out there pedaling it around himself. Had a good battle to fourth place in race one. He's currently struggling a bit now in fifth place for race two, with Alex Day in the rear-wheel drive Audi that's only likely to get quicker as the race goes on compared to the others around it anyway, because those rear-wheel drive cars, that rear-wheel drive car, as I should say, it's the only rear-wheel drive car on the grid, but it does look after its tyres a little bit better than the front-wheel drive ones, and there's a gap maybe on the inside here into Druids. Oh, Stuart takes that wide line in the late apex, and that just leaves that nice inviting gap up the inside. There's another inviting gap now down the inside into Graham Hill Bend, but Alex decided better of it. The NGTC car not quite as good on the brakes perhaps, though we've seen in previous rounds this year that does seem to be where the NGTCs have an edge, but in a straight line that's maybe where the TCR cars are a bit quicker, due to the balance of performance that's in place to maintain close competition out on the track. 9.5 minutes plus 1 lap to go, and less than half a second, by the way, now separate Henry Neal from Lewis Kent. So as entertaining as this battle is, we may have to turn our attention to the second place pair before much longer, but for now Alex Day still can't get past Stuart Lyons. Oh, but then Stuart runs wide at Paddock, and that's Day's chance. He's up the inside without a second invitation needed and should be able to complete the manoeuvre fairly easily into Druids. On that occasion, there was no way Stuart was going to close the door, and so Day has gone through. So Alex Day then into 5th place overall. Stuart Lyons down into 6th, but Darrell Wilson still about 8.8 seconds behind, and I fear that all is not quite right in the Vauxhall Astra TCR run by DW Racing. Right, then let's turn our attention, if we can, to our 2nd place battle. There's the leader, James Turkington, then. At the last count, he was 2.1 seconds ahead of these two, who are now absolutely together, Henry Neal and Lewis Kent. Now, how hard will Henry fight this? Will he decide that since Lewis is in a different class and fighting for a championship, he doesn't need to defend too heavily? Lewis is 2.8 behind Turkington, so since basically in the last 6 laps, he's taken at 1.2 seconds off Turkington's advantage. Now that he's stuck behind Neal, he's not lapping as quickly as the race leader. The gap went back out again, actually, by 0.2 on the previous occasion, so it had been down as low as about 2.6 seconds between 1st and 3rd. Now it's 2.8, because Henry Neal, we know, is a 1/10 or 2/10 a lap slower than James Turkington, and now Lewis Kent is stuck running at his speed. He can't go any quicker without driving into the back of the Honda, which is a bit wide through clearways. Lewis Kent almost poked his nose up the inside. I'm pretty sure that Lewis won't be too averse to using a bit of brute force to open this door if it's not going to open all on its own. Kent's pretty much matching Turkington there. He was a couple of hundredths slower, so he's not losing handfuls of time, but he is running out of time in this race now, and this is not the battle that he's particularly concerned with. He wants to get past Henry and then chase on after James Turkington, but Henry's out there to race, and he wants to race for whatever he can. And Lewis Kent flings it in. Look at the curb he uses through Graham Hill Bend. Brilliant to watch. It's an all-action driving style from the youngster, as I suppose you'd expect from the youngest driver on the grid. 19 years of age is Lewis Kent, who recently got himself a road-going Hyundai i30N line, which is the sort of step down from the full-blown i30N, but very nice it is as well. He was showing it off in the paddock earlier on, so Hyundai helping Lewis out, and he's, I'm sure, very grateful for their support as well. Hyundai would love to win the TCR UK Championship, and it's one of the few TCR championships, I suppose, that they haven't got on their list of championships won now. That i30N has had success around the world in TCR racing in the last 3 or 4 years. Now it is looking to try and move into 2nd place overall in this race, but they, despite the fact he's behind Henry Neal here, they're actually still taking time out of Turkington. He's sort of spurred Henry on this. Henry's going quicker now than he has been for some time, and Lewis Kent was 0.2 quicker than Turkington, so 1st to 3rd is now 2.6 seconds, but I feel that Lewis could go quicker than this and take even more time out of Turkington if only he could get past the NGTC spec Honda Civic in front of him, but that's not proving to be all that easy. What about a dive into paddock? We know that Honda is very good on the brakes. Amongst other NGTC cars, it's probably the best car on the brakes, and compared to the TCR machines around it, it seems to be fairly strong. But there's a mistake for Henry Neal. He's sideways through Paddock Hill Bend. Oh, a brilliant save there from Henry, but he's slow up the hill. Kent goes to the outside, though, because Henry somehow, whilst arm twirling and saving the slide, managed to have the presence of mind to get over to the inside to defend. But Lewis Kent is now really going to be sensing blood in the water, goes to the outside into Graham Hill Bend, looking for the cutback, trying to get back alongside down the Cooper Straight. He might be able to do it, but no, Henry Neal says not on your life, moves over to the left-hand side of the road to cover, and Lewis Kent now, they are definitely holding each other up, though. Lewis needs to try and force the issue a bit more here, I think. Henry defending again, runs a bit wide, can Kent get up the inside? It's so close, so close. If he could get a bumper to the rear of the Honda and just nudge it a little bit wide, then that's, I think, maybe his best bet through that corner, but he just can't quite get there. Up towards paddock they go again. The Hyundai ducking and diving behind in the wing mirrors of Henry Neal. They're now 3.4 seconds behind the leader, though, so this is costing them time. James Turkington 3.2 seconds ahead of Henry Neal, even, and 3.5 seconds ahead of Lewis Kent. And there in the background, look, Alex Day has caught Nick Halstead for 4th as well, but will rightly focus on this fight for 2nd place for the time being. Starting now, though, to worry about whether Lewis Kent would even have time to catch Turkington now, because the time that they lost on that previous lap, which was about 0.8 of a second to the leader, that may have just put James Turkington out of reach. Lewis Kent looks to the inside now into clearways. Can't do it again. Henry is wide and slow through the middle part of the corner, but seems to get good traction from that wide line and carries the speed along the pit straight. There goes Turkington, then a 50.5 for Turkington. Neal does a 50.4 and Kent a 50.4. So if it hadn't have been for the brief bit of side-by-side racing they had on the previous lap, then they would have probably still been able to keep taking time out of Turkington. Henry Neal, 5-second track limits penalty. So we thought maybe it'd be Kent that got the penalty, but it's Henry Neal that has done it, and that means that Lewis Kent is now second place in reality, but frustratingly the Honda is still physically there in front of him and stopping him from being able to catch the driver that he really needs to try and fight with. So Lewis would just love it now if Henry said, right, you know what, I've got a penalty, I'll let you go, but I'm pretty sure that's not what's going to happen. They go up towards clearways, meanwhile Nick Halstead's got Alex Day weaving around behind him, trying to bring the Audi through. This has been a strong performance, this, from Alex, after by his standards, fairly disappointing first race. Halstead again takes the high, wide and not so handsome run through clearways. So drama then for Henry Neal. What can Alex Day do here about Nick Halstead? We're into the closing stages of this second race of the weekend, round 8 of the 2019 Dunlop Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK Championship, and Halstead's wide at paddock, and I think that was one run wide too many there, because now Alex Day is up the inside and is going through. He's gone through at Druids and takes over 4th position now, and will probably not get much further than that, because this pair are about 7 seconds behind the Neal and Kent squabble, which is still taking time out of James Turkington. They were 4 tenths quicker than him on the previous lap. Henry Neal was anyway. So the lead gap down to 2.6 seconds now. So is James Turkington starting to run into tyre wear issue? We know that car is heavier than the Hyundai of Lewis Kent in particular. 2.5 seconds now the gap, so they only take a tenth out of him. In fact, Kent more or less matched him. But Lewis has actually dropped away slightly now from Henry. We saw the Hyundai run into issues tyre-wise at the end of race 1. Is that now starting to happen to James Turkington? It may have just been a blip, it may have just been a mistake that he made on the previous lap. But Henry Neal then, who I remind you is actually going to finish, or fall down at the moment to 3rd place on corrected times, but he's still the handy buffer between James Turkington and Lewis Kent, who still hasn't given up here though. Takes that nice wide line into clearways. Henry Neal there knows that if he just sits on the apex there, Lewis hasn't booted him out of the way yet, so he's not likely to do it either in the final few laps. So Henry knows where to defend and knows how to defend, and then onto the straight, the Honda seems to have an advantage. He's able to just break away slightly from the Hyundai. This pair on the previous lap were a couple of tenths slower than James Turkington or Henry Neal. In 2nd place, wasn't it? It's Henry Neal that's very, very much dictating the pace now of these two cars. Out of Druids, 1 minute and 35 left on the clock, plus the extra lap as well. And things finish as they are now then. The gap between Lewis Kent and James Turkington would go out by 7 further points. It would be a 19-point cushion for James Turkington going to Donington Park. But when we get to Donington Park, there will be 55 points still on offer. Even if this place changes hands now, I don't think it's going to make a difference, because I don't see Lewis Kent being able to catch this man, James Turkington, who comes across the start-finish line with, by my reckoning, 3 more laps to go. They should have time for 2 more laps, plus the extra one that gets added on at the end. And again, Henry Neal is wide, and has Kent finally prized the door open? He might have done it. He's got to the inside at Druids, and Lewis Kent, no, Henry Neal's very late on the brakes. Surely won't stop the car. He did, he stopped the car, he's held onto the corner. Well, I'm amazed that Henry Neal made the turn then. He was so much later on the brakes than Lewis Kent, and still refuses to get out of the way of the TCR UK Championship contender in what has been one of the best races of the season so far. And this battle is still not over. Lewis is now resorting to the headlight flashing tactic, which does occasionally work, but on this occasion doesn't force a mistake out of Henry. He's going to take a nibble out of that rear bumper any time now. He's getting frustrated. He knows that he's quicker than the Honda, but this has possibly cost him a chance for the TCR UK race victory. 5-second penalty now for Nick Halstead as well. And Henry Neal post-race. I don't know what that means, but that's the message I'm getting on my timing screen. So whether Henry's done something that he shouldn't have done that will be investigated after the race, I don't know. But none of this is benefiting Lewis Kent. He needs that Honda out of the way, and really he needed it out of the way about 10 minutes ago. It's just not worked out the way that Lewis Kent would have hoped this weekend at his home track. It looks as though James Turkington is now a lap and a half away from a 2nd TCR UK victory of the day and a 3rd of the season. Kent right up over the curb, just can't get there. Henry Neal, it's been a brilliant defensive drive this, and Henry has used the strengths of that NGTC Honda to perfection. Last lap board is out then, one more lap to go, 1.2 miles of racing. Can Lewis Kent at least salvage second place overall from this race, even if it won't help his points tally? It's looking less and less likely now. Henry Neal was 0.4 of a second clear at the start of the lap. They're still 2.5 seconds behind James Turkington, who can sort of afford now to stroke this one home. There's a nice battle developing between Nick Halstead and Stuart Lyons on the final lap as well, but we haven't dared take our eyes away from the front runners, because that is where the TCR UK Championship is being fought out. It will be either James Turkington or Lewis Kent that takes the title in a month and a half's time at Donington Park, and right now it is this man, James Turkington, who looks to be heading there in the strongest possible position, because with a double race victory here at Brands Hatch, he has outscored Lewis Kent massively over the weekend, and he does the double. 2 race victories at Brands Hatch for James Turkington, who wins in the Cupra run by Sicily Motorsport, and they will be over the moon with his weekend's work. Second place goes the way of Lewis Kent on corrected times. That was the frustration from Kent, because he knew he was going to inherit that second place anyway. And I can see out of the window, he's pulled up alongside Henry Neal on the run up Halewood Hill on the in-lap, and I don't think he was congratulating him. I think there will have been some words there, because in Lewis's opinion, and you can see it from both sides here, but Lewis will be thinking, well, you weren't in my race anyway, we're in different classes, and you had a penalty anyway, why didn't you just let me go? But of course Henry will say, well, penalties can be overturned post-race, and yeah, I'm not in your class, but I'm still looking for a second place finish overall. And Henry, I'm afraid to say, was quite right there to keep on defending. Certainly James Turkington will agree with that. I think he owes Henry Neal a pint or two in the bar later on, because that has earned James a very healthy points lead now going to Donington Park. He takes the double race victory then. Lewis Kent 2.4 seconds back at the flag. What could have been for Lewis in that race in the end. Henry Neal in third, Alex Day fourth, Stuart Lyons comes home in fifth. He didn't quite get the best of the Audi in the end. Nick Halstead also received a 5-second penalty in sixth position, and Darrell Wilson rounds out the runners. And points-wise then, let's just double-check all of this then. So James Turkington takes the 25 points. So he came into that race on 111 plus 25, means that he will go to Donington Park provisionally at least on 136 points. Lewis Kent will get 18 points to add on to the 99 he'd already scored for finishing second place. He will be on 117, and 136 minus 117 is 19. 19 points will separate them, by my reckoning anyway, and that is all provisional. A, because the results can still change, and B, because I can't count to save my life, but I did have a calculator to help me then, so I'm fairly confident that that is how it works. 19 points should be the difference, but with 55 available at Donington Park, anything can happen. Turkington will have to go to Donington Park now with maximum ballast. Lewis Kent will not have maximum ballast. He'll still be heavy, but not quite as heavy as the Cupra potentially. And he will also be going to that circuit knowing that that is a track that really suits the Hyundai. It went really well there. Remember, he took a double TCR victory at Donington Park there earlier on. And
yeah, just go, it's fine.
Coming to you in a minute, Bryn. Bryn eager to get on camera and talk to our drivers, understandably so. But yes, Donington Park unique in that it's the only track that we have visited twice this year. Will have visited twice, so we have a bit of form going into that final round, and we know that it's the Hyundai that was quick. It won both of the races there earlier on this season, but of course that was the first time James Turkington had ever driven the Cupra, and he was straight on the podium. It's going to be a fascinating title decider. To get the thoughts of our top 3 drivers after the 2 races at Brands Hatch then, is Bryn Lucas down in the pit lane.
Well, you might be able to make me out. I'm in the midst of all of the action at the moment. I'm going to grab a word. Let's grab a word with Lewis Kent to start with. Lewis, follow me this way so we can get a decent shot of you, because today it's not been one of the best days for you, but fighting back the way you did for a second place in both on track and also in TCT in TCR is quite useful for you.
Yeah, good way to end the day really. We had a really good battle with Henry. Didn't expect it. I was hoping to get past him, but I'll tell you what, these Neal boys, they know how to hold people up. But no, brilliant battle. And yeah, just a good way of ending the day. We've got a little bit of points back. Hopefully at Donington we can go again like we did last time at Donington, and yeah, hopefully we can claw back a bit more. Yeah,
it's kind of damage limitations, wasn't it? With James getting a second and a first as well. That's kind of tricky for you, but it also means that where you are now, you're kind of within 15 or so points away from him going into the final race meeting.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to do another croft. I'm going to have to try and do it. Yeah, the team will have a good car out. I know they do. They always do. So if they can have a good car for me, then we're away. So yeah, we're just going to have to hope we do it.
Yeah, well, we'll catch up with you soon, but well done.
Thank you.
There you go, Lewis Kent finishing second on track eventually. Let's get race winner then, James Turkington, because going into today, you kind of needed to continue the momentum of what you were doing, and now you're going to go into the final race meeting. Don't put the pressure on you, but 2 races to go and you're leading the way by about 15 points, I've made out.
Yeah, I never would have dreamt of being in this situation coming into this weekend, having still limited experience with TCR car, never here before, so in the car, so yeah, delighted, what can I say, just got a brilliant start and then just tried to do qualifying lap after qualifying lap, and yeah, the guys just give me an awesome car.
Imagine if you'd have been in a TCR car from day one, hey?
That would have been mega.
But looking ahead then, I mean, that was a pretty much a fairly easy race for you. It looked like you were kind of 3.5 second gap. It looked like you maintained it. Maybe you slowed up a bit nearer the end just to continue. That's what it looked like from the outside.
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as an easy race in TCR, but yeah, we just kept doing our thing and getting to the finish, and yeah, it's a good one for Northern Ireland this weekend. It's obviously a guy lost his life yesterday at Kirkeston, so that one's for all the guys at Kirkeston and the guys' family.
Yeah, well done to you as well.
Thank you.
There you go, race winner and second place on track there, James Turkington and Lewis Kent.